I made my therapist say Jesus Christ under her breath once, and I was like, well, that's not good, is it? But it gets worse and worse and worse.
I mean, I could have said Jesus Christ a good few times during what you've just told me. Today, we've got an absolute belter of a guest, stand-up powerhouse, podcasting legend, and all-round hilarious man. It's Adam Rowe. You know him from Have a Word, his sellout tours, and just being one of the sharpest comics in the UK right now. You're going to love this one, believe me. Adam.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I want to start with your childhood. Born 1992.
Correct.
Liverpool.
Yes.
Yes.
Saturday, the 11th of January at 27 minutes past 1.
Good, well remembered. 1 point, well done. Do me a favour, draw me a picture of that childhood. What does it look like, when you look out the window, the streets of Liverpool that you're looking at when you're a kid?
So, for the first 6 months of my life, I lived with my mum and dad in my paternal grandfather's house. So my dad's dad.
Yes.
In his house, we were all there because we didn't have a house yet. And they'd been trying for a few years to have me. And then I believe one day went to check whether they could have IVF, because not everyone can do that. And on the day they went to check, the doctor told me, Mum, you can't have IVF. Like Simon Cowell, by the way. And then was like, because you're pregnant. like literally, I didn't like it. I loved it. Like, what an awful thing to do to a woman who not only is devastatingly desperate to be pregnant, but is also now, she's pregnant. And you're putting her through stress for 6 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you can go, yes. Awful thing to do.
Here's one we made earlier. There's a little Adam
This is
Rowe.
your baby.
You were asleep. You're not going to know this. Whilst you were asleep, you gave birth.
You thought you went for a shit before. No. A baby. Yeah, so we were, and obviously I don't remember any of that. It's really funny, actually, because I must have been older. I think I was about 3 by the time we moved out. Because my first memory, it's going to see the house we ended up in. And the people who showed us around, I assume were from the council because it was a council house. And I swear this is true, and I'm not just doing bits. In my memory, to this second right now, the people who showed us around that house are the bad guys from Home Alone 3.
Home Alone 3?
3.
Okay. Yes. And no one remembers them.
Well, that's my favourite Home Alone. I know you're a film guy and that's going to upset you.
Yeah.
But it is the best one. And it's only nostalgia that means people go for the others. It's the best one.
Okay.
It's more fun, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I'll research that. We'll have a look.
I was obviously born with a defect of me left eye. So my left eyelid droops lower than the right one.
Okay.
And I got picked on a lot for that.
From very early on, can you remember the first time that became an issue? It's just been there, kind of evergreen. It's been there from the beginning.
Yeah, there's no memory of it, and it wasn't like bullying, or maybe it was, but like it doesn't feel like that to me. It just felt like that was the thing. If I ever had like a game of football, and like you going hard on a challenge or whatever, and you hit your mate,
yes,
and he'd be like, you cockeyed fuck or whatever, That'd be the first thing people would go for. And that does make you feel quite different, I suppose.
Does it make you feel bad?
It did. I didn't mention my eye on stage for the first 5 or 6 years of doing stand-up because I couldn't see the funny side of it. That's
amazing, because most stand-ups that will be the first thing they would do.
Yeah.
Is check the thing that everyone in the room has noticed. With me, for example, it used to be when I started, I would always open and reference what a state I looked. It would always be the first thing.
Yeah. I just didn't see any humour in it, so maybe it probably bothered me more than I think it did now. But what was quite interesting, a few years into doing it, another comic, Rob Thomas from Liverpool, he was like, why have you never mentioned your eye? Because we came up together, so he'd seen me from pretty much the start. I think he started 3 or 4 months after me. He's like, why don't you mention it? And I was like, I just don't find it funny. And he was like, yeah, but the audience are noticing it and wondering why you're not. He's like, you don't have to make it your act, but maybe start by going, oh, by the way, I know about this. And let's...
I mean, that's what that joke is doing. That's the device it's doing, is everyone, I know.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That is literally the bit that I did in the end. I was like, I don't want you sitting there thinking, does he fucking know his eyes doing laps of the estate? Like, I do, like, that was the bit. So, and then...
Which is taking... It's interesting to me that you, within the first 5 years, you made quite a unique decision in stand-up to not take control of your eye. 5 years, 6 years, is now you're taking control. You go on, you say, I know.
Yeah.
This is doing a lap of the estate. That's taken a long time for you to get control of that.
I've always joked about being fat on stage. Like, from day one, I've always made, like, chubby, like, references or whatever. And I found that funny. And I think, genuinely, the reason I never found humour in the eye stuff, but found humour in other stuff I was probably insecure about as well, like weight and whatever, is that I felt like being fat was my decision. Like, if I really wanted to not be fat anymore, I could just choose to not be fat anymore.
Okay.
But with the eye, I couldn't just choose to have two perfectly symmetrical eyes.
Yes. Right.
So, like that was, like, inflicted on me by, you know, a god or a bottle of vodka that my mum fancied while she was pregnant or whatever. So...
We'll get to that. Yeah.
So, yeah, like, I think I was always a pretty confident young kid and always enjoyed playing football and stuff, but also I was very, very good at maths.
I just want to stop you on what you just said there. Before we get to maths, confidence, a thing that, you know, certainly in comedy, showbiz, I suppose any walk of life is such a valued thing to have confidence. Where have you got confidence from?
So anything I was good at, I would show off about, and anything I was either mild, like not that good at, or bad at, I just wouldn't do. So
yeah, okay.
So I was good at footy. I was decent at football as a young kid, and you get to sort of teenage and people who are at academies and stuff, because the school I went to by then was a lot of people who were playing for Liverpool's, like, under 12s and whatever. So I couldn't get in our school team. I was never that good.
Yes.
So I stopped doing it. But, like, younger than that, I would play and, like, you know, be quite a decent football. So I'd play football a lot. But the thing I was always really, really, really good at was maths. And I would literally, and this was so nerdy, but, like, I would ask my mum to do me, like, a page of sums to do. So that I could do them, and then she'd mark them for me.
You were getting your mum to give you exams. You were doing homework. You were making homework.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. Someone was making their own homework.
But it was a way for me to show off. There was no sums she could write on that sheet that I wouldn't be able to do. So she'd write 20 sums, and I'd answer all 20 of them. And she'd be like, you got 20? And I'd be like, because I'm fucking sick.
So good.
Like,
yes.
So anything I was good at, I just threw everything into. And I think that's why, and I know we'll probably get onto this much later on in the pod, but that's why I loved that. I was like, I look back and I hate the material, and I want to blow my head off when I look at the jokes I did when I started. But when I started stand-up, I was doing well straight away.
Yes.
I wasn't having bad gigs, really. Like, it was boring. Like, it makes me want to be sick of the jokes I was doing, because they're just like...
Well, everyone's got to start somewhere, you know.
Totally. But it went well. And as soon as it went well, and I was like... I remember someone going, oh, you're good. Do you want to come do my gig? I'll give you 35 quid. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I could get paid for this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Like, why would I not?
So that wasn't something that you knew going into it, that you could get paid for it?
No, I hadn't really considered it. The reason I got into it was I was working in McDonald's, and one of the managers in there, really good friend of mine called Dave, he introduced me to, like, Bill Hicks. Because, like, I was a fan of Lee Evans and Jason Manford and Kevin Bridges and those sorts of guys. But then we started trying to time our breaks so that we could watch stand-up together on the office computer.
Amazing.
And I loved stand-up because my mum had introduced me to it before all of this as well. And then it was his idea. He was like, I'm going to do a stand-up show. I'm going to do a gig.
Wow.
And he was like, would you do it with me? And I was like, yeah, fuck it, yeah. And later that day, he called me because he'd finished his shift. And I went to the toilet in McDonald's to answer the phone because I was like, why is he calling me? He's my manager. And he's calling me when he knows I'm in work. And he was like, we've got a gig 17th of July at the Metropolitan Pub. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, they've said they'll give us the upstairs room for free, so we're going to do it in there. We'll just invite a load of people down. And we sold to our family and friends and whatever, we sold 120 tickets at like £3 a go. And because we'd sold it to so many people we knew.
You didn't, so sorry, let's just be clear. You didn't go and do a spot at a comedy night that existed.
So
you started your own comedy night.
Yeah.
It's the most Adam Rowe thing.
Yeah, I see that now. But to be fair, I did 2 gigs before that.
Okay.
So because we sold that many to that many people that I knew.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to make sure this isn't a waste of everyone's time first.
Right. All right.
So I booked in 2 open spots. I did Hot Water Comedy Club when it was in a nightclub called Envy.
Right.
They had a Sunday
Hot Water
open
Comedy
mic.
Club being one of the biggest comedy clubs in the country, if not
in the world.
In the world, yes.
They ran at the time. All they ran was a Sunday open mic. That was it.
Wow.
So I did 10 minutes there, and I went and did Beat the Frog at the Frog and Bucket in Preston.
Tell me what Beat the Frog is.
So Beat the Frog is a gong show, similar to King Gong, in that 3 people in the crowd. So there's a compere, there's a host, and then there's 2 people on in the first section of the show who've won Beat the Frog before. And then sections 2 and 3 of the show, they hand out 3 cards to people in the crowd. And you go on and you're trying to do 5 minutes. But if someone in the crowd hates what you're doing with a card, they will put their card up. And if all 3 go up, you get kicked off stage.
And it encourages the crowd really to really get involved, almost like a pantomime, and heckle and boo.
No. So King Gong does that. And I love hosting King Gong. I think it's class. And I think, people who go and do it, they know what they're signing up for. Beat the Frog's a lot more gentle.
Okay.
Beat the Frog's a lot more, hey, give everyone a minute.
Oh, it's very nice.
But if they're having a bad time, it's in no one's interest to keep them up here. Get the cards up and get bad comics off.
Right.
Like, they know what they've signed up for. Let's give them a minute to find their feet. They're all new.
Okay, very nice.
But I got to the 5 minutes and I lost out, I think. Up until recently, I'd confabulated this memory that I'd won it, but I don't think I did win that one.
Okay.
I think I came second to a now really good mate of mine, Pete Otway. I don't know whether you know Pete.
Yes, I do, yeah. No, Pete. Lovely man.
But that was enough for me to go, oh, I'm all right at this.
Yes.
And then we did the show that we'd sold to our family and friends.
And it went great.
And it was great. The only interesting thing about the show to our family and friends is a week before that show, the pub that we'd booked to do the show in closed permanently. So we had to scramble last minute and find a new venue. And we found an old Dockers pub in Liverpool called the Casa. So we changed the name to the Casa Comedy Night. And their room only holds between 80 and 100, and we had 120. So people were stood in the fire exit in the rain watching the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Where does that's kind of entrepreneurial.
We just got to move it, yeah.
But you kind of, you mentioned your confidence. I want to do stand up. I'm going to put on a comedy night. This isn't really the typical way of doing things. Where does that? There doesn't seem to be, on the surface of things at least, there doesn't seem to be, even in the young Adam Rowe, there doesn't seem to be much self-doubt. There seems to be, just in what you've already just told me, and we know the success that Have a Word is going to be, and you're going to be. But even there, at a young age, where does that confidence come from? Is that instilled, has your mum passed that on? Has your father passed that on? Or is it completely designed by you?
Well, there's a couple of things to say. First of all, the idea to put the comedy night on, as much as I encouraged and liked the idea, that was Dave's idea, really.
Okay.
Dave was like, we're going to do a show. He was like, should we do stand-up? And I was like, yeah. And later that day, he was like, we've got a gig.
Okay.
But it's also worth saying that back then, I didn't know comedy clubs were a thing. I didn't know comedy nights were a thing. my only exposure to stand-up was TV and DVDs.
And you said there that you would have watched those with your mum.
Yeah, so there's a pretty key moment in the development of my relationship with my mum, which is the separation of my mum and dad. So, and the difficult thing to admit with this, and I've spoke about this before on Have a Word many moons ago, is that I kind of caused it. It was the argument that led to their breakup was my fault. So my mum, where in, I think like late 90s, early 90s, she had a hysterectomy. So she had some cysts. So she had a hysterectomy. I think that's the removal of the womb.
Okay.
You can't have any more kids after that.
And you've got a brother?
I've got a little brother, yeah.
Yes.
He's nearly 4 years younger, 3 years, 11 months younger. So she had a hysterectomy, and she got permanent nerve damage in her leg as a result of the hysterectomy. And, you know, she was technically entitled to compensation that never really came, because there is a 4% risk. I might have that figure wrong, but I think I'm right. There's a 4% risk of this type of injury when you get a hysterectomy. And the legality around it is, if there's less than a 5% risk of something happening, they don't have to warn you. So my mum and dad, after their hysterectomy, thought that that's too high. Like if 1,000 people are going to have this surgery every year, and it's a lot more than that, that means 50 people get it a year.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You know, these are real people, not just numbers, sort of thing.
Yes.
But as a result of this permanent nerve damage, as well as being an alcoholic, which you know, but the listeners won't until right now, she was an alcoholic who drank vodka and Diet Coke. Because of the permanent nerve damage, she was on extremely strong painkillers, essentially opioids and morphine and cocodamol and stuff like that. But the pain was so bad that she would struggle to sleep. And she was also on sleeping tablets and addicted to all of this, you know, because she needed it to get through the pain and the day and whatever.
Adam, were you aware of this at the time?
Yeah.
How old are you?
10, 11.
Because that's a lot for a young boy to be aware of.
Yeah. And it's sort of, this story does get a bit worse, to be honest. But we can do all of it. And it's stuff I've spoke about in therapy, and it's quite interesting when you talk about it in therapy and your therapist, like, I made my therapist say Jesus Christ under her breath once, and I was like, well, that's not good, is it? Because I'm not your first patient of even today, never mind in general. And I've made you say Christ.
Yeah.
Because I speak about all of this stuff like it happened to somebody else, which is a trauma response and a coping mechanism. It's detachment. Like I'm not very emotional about it right now, as you can probably see. And it, you know,
well, I like referring to people's acts. If the act is, you know, if we go along the lines of the act is an extension of the person, that's a very robust act, and that's a very it's an act that pushes out.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking in terms of energy. I think, you know, you open up with what you talk about, but the energy pushes out.
Yeah.
And it's robust. And I think that refers to the person.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. But what my mum would do sometimes is she would take her sleeping tablets, because they were also extra painkillers, essentially. That's what a sleeping tablet is. It puts you into such numb way that you can go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So she would take them for the pain, but then she would sort of fight the urge to sleep and stay up and drink. And that would make it a bit mental at times, you know. And it was a huge cause of friction, to be overly generous with language, between her and me dad.
Yes.
And I knew that, because I'm seeing them argue about it.
Yes.
A lot. And there was one night where my dad had a couple of friends over the road called Mick and Joanne. And they were family friends, it wasn't just his friends. But he was over there, and it was a Sunday night, and it was bath night and night before school and all that stuff. And me mum was like, where's your dad? Because she's got 75 things to do. She's bathing both kids. She's cooking the dinner. She's packing our lunches for the next. She's, spinning plates.
That was the way. That was generally the way?
She was very domesticated in that way, yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad was the breadwinner, especially after her hysterectomy. She eventually got a job in a fruit and veg shop,
Okay.
like just on the till and stuff. But my dad was a painter and decorator. And when he wasn't in work, because that was, he was normally in work, but there was times when he weren't, and then we were just on benefits.
And although it's, it's glaringly obvious, I think it's just important to state this is a very working class background.
Yeah. Like between working and underclass.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly. Yeah.
I went abroad once when I was 4 with
Yeah.
my aunt and uncle, and then didn't go abroad again until my late 20s.
Yeah.
But my dad was in his friends. He's in Mick and Joanne. And my mum goes, where's your dad? Where the fuck's your dad? And I go, oh, he's in Mick and Joanne's. And she goes, oh, he's skiving. And she was like pissed off. That's all she said. And then by the time my dad came back, I was in trouble with my mum. I can't remember what I'd done, but me and my mum were essentially sort of arguing. And I would argue back with my mum, but not with my dad. And he comes back and my mum goes, talk to Adam because this, and this, blah, blah, blah. And he's being naughty, essentially. And my dad starts like shouting at me. And I just wanted to get out of trouble. So I said, I don't know why you're having a go at me when my mum's accusing you of skiving because she's had her tablets. So once she'd had her tablets, she would become a slightly different person and they would argue about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said that knowing it would cause an argument between them and that would get me out of trouble. And I'll tell you what, it fucking worked.
Yeah.
Like it really worked.
Yeah.
And that argument was hours long. And that night they broke up for the first time. And after that, they got back together a few times and tried to make it work, but they never did. And that was that was their breakup. Now, obviously, for years after that, and even to this day, there's 1% of me that blames myself for that. Through therapy, like I remember one thing my therapist said was, if a child's lie to get out of trouble, one lie, a sentence like that can cause a marriage to break up, then it was so unbelievably fragile anyway, and it was probably going to end on their next big argument anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe you would have bought them an extra week or two by not saying it, but you can't blame yourself. And, you're essentially paying a therapist a lot of money to tell you that, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That all of the decisions you made are actually correct, and you're a great guy.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. Nah, they were on the way out.
Totally justified.
Yeah,
yes.
Totally. So that wasn't good. And later that week, I had an entrance exam to get into a really good school in Liverpool. It's called the Blue Coat. And it's not a private school, but you do have to be in a certain percentile to get in. You have to pass the exam.
And you would have been in this because of maths?
Yes.
Right.
And I missed out by 4 places, I think. 4 or maybe 7 places.
Right.
So they were like, hey, Adam hasn't got in. With hindsight, I don't think I'd have started stand-up if I ever went there.
Of course. Yes, exactly.
It's all good in the end. But, like, my dad picked me up from the exam one day and he's like, how did it go? And I was like, I just didn't give a shit. I didn't try at the exam and still nearly got in.
Yes.
All of this to say, a very long-winded way to answer the question you asked before, which was, once my mum and dad had broke up, I became my mum's friend. Her only friend, really. So what would happen is it would get to bedtime, let's say 8:30, 9 p.m. And she would send me and my little brother to bed. But as soon as he fell asleep, I was allowed to go back downstairs and watch TV with my mum. And it would normally be stand-up. So that was where my relationship with comedy started, was Live at the Apollo.
Yes.
Old DVDs, Lee Evans. Back then, like the BBC would just play, like once every 2 weeks, Lee Evans live at Wembley would be on BBC Two or whatever.
And at this point, when you're watching stand-up with your mum, there's no bit of you that thinks that you can go on to do this?
Not really. Not until I seen Jason Manford and Kevin Bridges.
Right.
Because Jason Manford especially, I was like, oh, he's like me.
Northern working class.
Northern
Is that
working
what
class.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just identified a lot with what he was saying.
What he was saying.
You know? And that's why when, you know as well as anyone else in our industry, there's a lot of conversation in our industry about like representation and stuff. And, you know, we can all argue that some people get opportunities on TV too soon because they tick the right box or whatever.
Yes.
But the reason that is necessary is so that people who don't see themselves in anyone else think it's possible for them.
Absolutely.
And I do, you know, I think if we're truly honest, box ticking does, for a while at least, dilute the standard on TV.
Yeah.
It certainly can do that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important because I think people do have to see themselves in.
It's had a profound effect on your life, clearly.
Yeah.
You know, seeing Jason Manford, seeing Bridges, watching stand up with your mum. You know, you've described what the streets of Liverpool were. What were the expectations of the children growing up where you grew up? What were the expectations of them to go on and do with their lives? Because I can't imagine it was to go and be a stand-up comedian.
No, so my mum and my dad were both very protective of me and my little brother in that regard, because there's a lot of people from our estate who were, and I hate saying this because it feels like I'm slagging off where I'm from, but I'm not. This is just the truth. A lot of them were never leaving that estate. They're still there.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
They live 4 doors down from their mum and dad, and they've had 3 kids.
Yes.
And they've just ended up, you know, really, really nearby.
That's the way.
Yeah.
That's generally the way.
And there was, you know...
I remember an Uber driver saying to me a few years ago when we were driving through Maida Vale in London, and for some reason I asked him if he was from Maida Vale. I don't know why. There would have been a reason. And he laughed and he said, "Of course not. Born poor, die poor." And
yeah,
that is generally the case. And you've broken that mold. You've left that estate.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is, how has that happened? So I'm gonna chuck a quote at you, and you know this quote is coming, but it's Aristotle that said, "Give me a child until the age of 7, and I will show you the foundations of the man."
Yeah.
Now, Aristotle has you until the age of 7. Does he know that you're going to be filling arenas?
No, no, I don't think it's 7.
Where are you at 7?
My mum and dad are still together.
They're still together. You're a happy child?
Fairly. You know, I felt different with the eye, definitely. And
you keep saying different and not, and it's really, I'm not just picking you up on this for the sake of it. It's because it interests me. You're saying different. You're not saying sad. You're not saying bad. You're saying different. What
I do mean those things though by that word. So
yeah, okay,
by different, I mean, I think anyone who feels different to an entire room of people doesn't feel good unless you're the comedian facing the opposite way to everyone else who's looking right at you.
Here we go.
I was a relatively happy child, but you know, I had like 3 friends.
And you're a clever child. Sorry, Ed, you're a clever child.
Yeah.
And again, this is sweeping generalizations, but generally speaking, you know, the presumption is on an estate in Liverpool, you're not going to be getting a lot of people that are going to go on to higher education. You've been given this gift of being incredibly good at maths, which is in the where you've grown up is slightly, you know, is unique anyway.
Yeah.
And then particularly on an estate.
Yeah.
And you've got this self-belief, which is remarkable. And I've witnessed from when you started comedy to now, I've watched this belief give rise to you. You know, it's been incredible. Where does that come from? It's still remarkable that with everything that you've described, your mother, her alcoholism, the medication, this is a very difficult upbringing on paper for a child. And with a lot of people, I think it would be fair to say that that could seriously, the story could goes, he ended up in prison. The story goes, he ended up being an alcoholic. The story goes, he ended up on drugs and all of those things. That's not happened. You've made an incredible impact on stand-up comedy, on the business in the United Kingdom. And I want to see if if you look back, where's that come from? It's, you know, the entrepreneurial side I've mentioned. Was that there when you were a kid?
Yeah. There's a lot to answer here. So first of all, not only were we on a poor estate, not everyone was super poor. Some people had 2 working parents, and they bought their council house, but they're relatively decent sized houses, and you get it for relatively cheap, so you can buy it. So they don't fucking move. They're like, just buy this for 110 grand and live in this 3-bedroom house with a massive garden forever. We were one of, I wouldn't say but one of the poorest houses on the street. So we're, you know, my mum would go into like debt so that we felt like we were keeping up with the rest of the street. She would get loans at Christmas time to make sure we had enough Christmas presents and new clothes so that we didn't feel like we were less off than everyone else, even though we sort of knew we were.
So you were conscious of that?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'll share with you then. My dad was often out of work, and my dad was, you know, he was a heroin addict. And so there were a lot of points where there was absolutely no money. And I was watching my dad looking for change, for tobacco, you know, to try and get down to the BP for fags, and he couldn't afford it. And he made me aware of that from a very young age, this kind of financial pressure. And do you think that at that age, when you're young, you're being made aware of this reality, and that your family is trying to keep up with the people around you?
Absolutely. And to the point where, you know, there's a loan company called Provident, and it's sort of scoutified to Provi. So like that you would get like a £200 loan off them, and you would pay back £20 a week for like 14 weeks. So you end up giving 280 back.
Right.
But the man would knock at your door. He would knock at the door and say, "Is your dad in?" Like, and your dad would come and give him his 20 quid, and he'd go away for the week. And but sometimes we'd be told to go and hide in the kitchen.
Wow.
And pretend we're not in.
Wow.
And they'd pay double the week after, or whatever, or extend it by another week. And I think what that did to me, and there's a lot to unpack from what you said before, and I'd like to get to all of it, but what that did for me is made me go, oh, I'm just going to have to outwork everyone else.
Great.
Like, I think that's the attitude it gave me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm always going to have less than everyone. It's like, oh, I'm just going to have to work harder than everyone.
Wow.
To get ahead of them, or to even match them. Like, if I'm going to, if someone's starting here and I'm here, we can both get there. I just have to run a bit quicker and start a bit earlier, sort of thing.
I'm laughing, by the way, because it fills me with genuine joy, because what you're describing is the Adam Rowe that I have met as a young stand-up comedian to the Adam Rowe now, and now we're finding where that comes from as a child. It's amazing.
So the first way I started doing that was I got 2 paper rounds.
Right.
And I would sell sweets on the yard at school. So I would buy a multi-pack of 12 discos for £1.50. And I would sell them. So you get 12 packs of discos for £1.50. And I would sell them for 50p a bag.
Yeah.
So I'd make £4.50 profit on a multi-pack of discos. And then I would get 8 Lucasades for £3, and they were £1 each. So I'd make a £5 on them. Yeah. And then I'd get 7 like Dairy Milk or Galaxies for like whatever, and I'd make that. I was making exactly, I remember this, £14.50 a day profit. So I'm making £72.50 a week profit. from sweets on the yard at school, which at
Right.
13 is a lot.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm getting £20-ish from each paper round.
Yeah.
So that's over 100.
So now the maths is kicking in.
And
Right, I see
then
it.
on top of the paper round,
Yes.
yeah, I've seen you do your bit about LimeWire. Remember
Yeah,
LimeWire?
yeah, of course.
I
So
got a
downloading,
computer.
streaming, downloading music for the first time, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would download full albums and burn them onto CDs and sell the CDs. But I would sell and DVDs. So I'd get like a pirate copy of a DVD and I would make 10 copies of that and then sell them. But I would sell them to the people I delivered the paper to. So on money collection day, when I'd have to...
God.
So every day of the week, you just post the paper through the door.
Yeah.
But on a Friday, you don't do that. You knock with the paper and wait for that week's money for the paper. And I would take the money for the paper and then I'd be like, and do you want... I've got these DVDs and CDs with me.
Do you like Eminem?
Yeah. Yeah. But also, if I haven't got what you want, I'll be back on Monday and I can bring you and I would take orders from the people on the paper round. And it was £3 for a CD, £2 for a fiver, £5 for a film. And with the £3 or £2 for a fiver, I would also, that was for a specific album.
Yeah.
Or like a Now That's What I Call Music 13 or whatever. But I said, if you want any 10 songs,
Okay.
I'll make you that mixtape for a fiver as well.
Okay.
So give me a list of 10 songs, I'll go and make it.
Right. So yeah. So you were an entrepreneur, definitely, when you were younger. And I, just in case people don't know, and just in case people are watching this, and actually they don't know much about your background, and they haven't heard you talk about this on Have a Word, and maybe you know, they've been in space and they don't know what Have a Word is. But Have a Word is the biggest Patreon in the UK, one of the biggest in the world.
UK, and I think it's 15th in the world.
One of the biggest Patreon shows in the whole world. And this took off in lockdown. Were you getting much TV work before this?
I've done
Bits and
TV
tiny...
4 or 5 times, and that's it.
Right. So
Ever, and that's in 15 years.
Why? Again, you know, I was laughing there whilst you were telling me. Is it just absolutely mirrors this? But I could just do that. I'll just walk round this way. I'll go this way to get what I want. So the Adam I'm talking to now fills out huge theatres, plays arenas, right? And fills the arenas. You know,
arena. Just one.
It's not bad.
It's unbelievable. But
it's not bad. It's an incredible feat, and that's someone that made his own way. And you look back, and that idea, that thought of, and I know that all that determination and that self-belief, it came from you. And Have a Word was this kind of vision that you had. Was it you when you were a kid? That thing you talked about, I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to start sooner to get ahead, or to even just be on a level with the people around me. Did you instill that in yourself? Did your mother, you know, you watched Stand Up with your mother and you had a good relationship with your father?
Yeah.
And so did they help nurture this belief? You know, Adam, we love you. We think you're brilliant. You're incredibly talented. Whatever, you know, they saw, but you are going to have to work harder.
No.
Don't doubt yourself. So where's it come from?
No. So they massively encouraged me with academia and especially mathematics. So they were like, you're great at this. Do this. And, you know, when other kids on the street like started going out and drinking in parks at like 11, 12, 13, I wasn't allowed to do that because in my mum's head, that led to drugs.
Yeah.
And my mum was totally anti-drugs. Now, she's addicted to pharmaceutical, like prescription drugs.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But I've tried cocaine now, and thank God I don't like it. And I've tried weed, and thank God I don't like it. If my mum was alive and knew either of those things, she wouldn't speak to me for a while. Even if I'd had one line of cocaine or one puff of a joint, she'd be like, I'm disgusted with you. Like, she hated it. Really hated it.
Yes.
And I'm
Do you
similar.
know why?
I think she just seen it as like the dregs of society.
Yes.
Like, and I know that's not necessarily right, but that was her opinion on it. And that has been bred into me. And to this day, if I'm dating a girl and I know she does drugs, I'm like, I don't ever want to see that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I'm not controlling you. Do whatever you want. You're your own person.
Yeah.
It will taint my image of you if I've got the image of you doing a line in my head.
Yes.
So I just don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And that comes from her. But
So there are principles being instilled from
Yeah.
an early age, and there's encouragement coming from your parents. So that's going to, I think that's going to encourage you to, to go ahead and do maths.
Uh-huh.
They believe in you. There is belief there.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite crucial, I think, to have had belief from your parents. It might not have been with stand-up.
Yeah.
At this point in your life.
Yeah.
But you still had belief coming from somewhere.
But also, like, if I'd told them at that age, I want to be a stand-up comedian, I fully believe they'd have gone, great, cool. But also make sure you're doing maths.
Okay.
Like, I think they'd have gone, great, we're all in. But maybe just have this as a backup.
But you were, how old were you? So remind me, it's 18 with stand-up.
Yes.
So did you have to have that conversation?
Sort of. So I was still at sixth form when I started stand-up.
Studying?
Maths, further maths, psychology and economics.
Okay.
So A-levels meant to be 2 years.
Yes.
I did 3 because for my GCSEs, I didn't revise once. I didn't do a single bit of revision at GCSE.
Same.
And I got an A star, 7 A's, a B, and 5 C's.
Not same.
The A star was in English literature, and one of the A's was in English language, and one of the A's was in maths. And I got called in by my maths teacher and told off because an A wasn't good enough. Wow. He was like, you should have walked to an A star. And I was like, yeah, but I've got an A without opening a fucking textbook for months. Like, I might, like, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
At A level.
So things were expected of you.
I think because the thing with schools is, which you don't really know at the time, and especially, STEM subject teachers, they have targets to hit.
Yeah.
So my maths teacher's probably looking at his class and going, well, I'll get at least 1 A star because I've got Adam. And then he doesn't.
That's very cynical.
From me or from him?
From you. I mean, you're still, he might have been disappointed in you that someone from a poor background and an estate really had the potential to get an A star.
It didn't feel like that.
Okay.
Right. I can remember the conversation pretty well. And I've always been quite a perceptive person, or at least I think of myself that way. Like, I pick up on people's intent, I think, quite well. And I won't be generous with myself in these situations unless I think I'm right. And I think I let the school's quotient down.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. Anyway, I get to A level and I'm like, well, I flew through my GCSEs, I'll just have the same attitude. So by the end of the second year, I have failed further maths, psychology and economics, but I've got an A again without really trying in maths. But that's not good enough to get into a proper red brick uni. So I sat back for a further year to do it again.
Okay. Parents angry?
No, not really. By this point, my mum's alcoholism has really sort of took a toll, and I'm now living with my dad by the time I'm in 3rd year of sixth form. And we probably just had bigger problems than me staying back for another year. Also, all of my friends were in a very similar situation. And I had really bright friends at school as well. Like even Carl, who you know well from Have a Word.
Who is the producer on
Yeah.
Have a Word?
He'd done the same thing. He'd flown through his GCSEs, got to A level, fucked around, and yeah, he'd fucked it, and we had to all stay back here. It was just the best thing for a good chunk of us to do.
And you took Carl with you, your best friend,
Where
to Have a Word. You guys...
Eventually, yeah. So when I started stand-up, Carl helped me run some comedy nights. Carl ended up working at Baby Blue and then became the manager of Hot Water. And then when me and Dan started to Have a Word, Carl was living in Japan. And while he was there, he was calling me and he's like, look, when I come back to the UK, because he was there for a year teaching English as a foreign language, he's like, I don't want to be a teacher. He's like, I want to work in comedy, but I don't want to be working in bars anymore. I'm sick of the life of, you know, a bartender. I'm a manager. So what can I do in comedy? And I was like, well, you could become an agent. You could go and work for a big agent and work your way up, or you could be a promoter, whatever. I was like, but what you could do is maybe come and work on really bad money for me and Dan and learn how to use a camera. I said, I think that's the way things are going. A lot of people are going to need cameramen and editors. And he was like, all right, sound. And he came back. And when we initially hired Carl, it was on £10 an hour for 16 hours a week.
Wow.
And I was like, you're going to have to probably get another job on the side, but we'll give you 16 hours at the pod.
Yeah.
And we doubled it to 20 quid an hour initially, once the pod was making a bit more money.
Yes.
And I think it was like 20 hours a week. And then about 3 months into him being there, me and Dan had a conversation where we were like, we think it will be much more in his interest to grow this and really, really care about it.
Yeah.
If we give him a cut of the limited company.
Yes.
So that's what
again, your entrepreneurial side, this business that you've started with the maths. Surely that's come in handy with the business side of show business.
Yeah.
You've got both. Most people in show business just have the show.
Yeah.
And you've got the show and the business. You're very, very lucky.
Yeah. It's yeah.
I just want to go back to, because I missed something there. I want to go back to when you eventually had to move in with your dad.
Yeah.
And we talked about, or you mentioned, saying your parents would have been supportive in whatever you did.
Yeah.
So you're at your dad's when
I start stand up.
Yeah. So what's that conversation?
So I mean,
and at this point, by the way, the idea when you decide I'm gonna, you're at McDonald's, you're going to do that gig, and we will get to what that conversation with your dad. At this point, there's no plan in your mind. Your mind isn't even letting itself kind of wander to, I can be a star. I can play the arena, as you put it. I can be one of the most successful shows in the world.
No, nowhere near it. No.
Okay, right. So it's just your friend is setting you up with on a comedy night, and you're going to do that thing that gives you joy, and that you.
Yeah, because I was just obsessed with it. Because just to go back a little bit further for now.
Great.
When
let's
when my mum and dad break up and I start watching stand up with my mum, after a few years, I would also sort of, I didn't realise what I was doing really, but I would drink with my mum at like 14.
Wow.
So, at the time, my mates had already started sort of drinking.
Smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, my mum didn't want me on a park on a Friday night, but she didn't mind me having 4 cans of lager sat next to her watching Dylan Moran. Do you know what I mean? And at the time, I don't know what alcoholism is. I just know my mum drinks.
Yeah.
So, she'd send me to the off license with a note. And the fellow who worked in the off license would be like, your hands, lad. And he would serve me. He knew I was 14, but he'd give me it because he thought it was for my mum. So I'd go and she'd get half a bottle of vodka, like whatever the cheapest one was, like 35 CLs of vodka. And I'd get 4 cans of Carlin. And we'd sit and watch the telly and I'd drink with my mum.
Such a such a bonding experience.
Insane.
I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've put this together yourself.
Mhm.
It doesn't take a therapist, but the thing that you bonded with,
Yeah.
bonded over with your mum
Was
is
her
the
demise.
is
Yeah.
the thing you go and end up
And
doing.
it's led to an interesting relationship with me and my dad, which again we'll get to. But my mum goes from, drinking half a bottle of vodka, or what I thought was half a bottle of vodka. She was also drinking during the day without me seeing, and she wanted me to think I was drinking half a bottle. It was closer to 2 full bottles. But it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, the thing with my mum was she was a great mum first and then an alcoholic until I was about 16, 17. And she got help.
What changed in that point, that turning point? What was that turning point?
So I used to also play with the money I was earning from selling sweets and paper rounds and DVDs.
Yeah.
Me and my mates would play poker. And they weren't like fucking high stakes, but we play like a 20 quid game of poker once a week and winner takes all sort of thing. So I had like a poker set. I had like a thing that would go on a dining table that made it look like a real poker table. And I had like a long metal tray with loads of poker chips in.
Mm-hmm.
And two of my mates were coming to mind to play. And it was, evening, 5 p.m., 6 p.m.-ish.
Yep.
And by now my mum would be drinking. So I came into the house and went upstairs to grab my poker set from my bedroom. I'm running, really. I run into my room, I get the poker set and the thing, and I run out of it. So now I'm coming out of my room to go down the stairs. So my mum's room's on the right. And I just glance in as I go past it. And I get about 5 steps down the stairs before I go, was my mum face down on the floor there? So I come back up and she's hammered and she has stood up or tried to stand up off the bed and she's fell on her face. And it wasn't like a full one, but just like a tiny bit of a nail is sticking out of one of the floorboards and it's cut her head. Now, it hadn't like cracked her skull or anything, but it looked worse than it was because she's bleeding from her face.
Luckily, yeah.
So I call an ambulance, and I'm smirking because there is something funny coming in a minute. I call an ambulance. We go to hospital. The hospital's so busy. We went to Wiston Hospital on the outskirts of Liverpool. The hospital's really busy, but my mum can't sit or stand up. She's that drunk. But there's people with much more urgent needs than her. So there's no room for her. So they put her on a bed in the corridor of A&E, right? They wheel a bed out. They're like, we've got a bed.
Yeah.
You're not getting a room because there's people who are fucking having heart attacks and stuff.
Yes.
So she is there and they're just giving her water full of electrolytes trying to sober her up. And at one point she's semi-compos mentis now. And she sort of realizes where she is. So she's like, she sort of is like, oh, fuck. I'm at the hospital and it's because I'm drunk and I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm going to have to talk to these doctors. And she remembers that she's got a half bottle of vodka in her bag. So I'm sat or stood like leaning on the bed that she's on. And we're in a busy A&E. And she takes the half bottle of vodka out of her bag. And she's sort of looking, making sure no one's watching her. Because she's still pissed, but she's just semi-compos mentis.
Yes.
She takes the bottle out of her bag and she pushes it down the side of the hospital bed. And it smashes and it goes all over the floor in A&E. And she looks right at me and just goes, as if she's going to get away with what's just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So even then, I remember laughing at that, being like, this is funny. This is insane.
Yes.
We're there for hours.
Yeah.
And eventually, she gets called in. They tell her, there's no sign of concussion. She hasn't cracked a bone.
Yeah.
It's a cut on her head.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they go, we would like to just talk about, how you ended up in that situation.
You're there for this. You're hearing
I'm sat
this.
right next to her. And the doctor asked her, do you think you have a drinking problem? And she said no. And I said, Mum, come on. And she just burst out crying. And that was the moment where I realised how much she was drinking, because the doctor said, how much are you drinking? She goes, sometimes I'll have half a bottle of vodka in a day. And I went, Mum, because I thought it was closer to a full bottle. And she goes, no, okay, it's 2. And the doctor goes, 2 half bottles? And she goes, no, I'm having, at the minute, close to 2 full bottles of vodka a day. So at that point, she gets help. She goes through rehab at home. And the way it works is you start with it's like an alcohol replacement drug. I forget the name of it.
Okay.
And it's like on Monday, it's a 2-week thing. So it's like on Monday, you take 4 tablets in the morning, 4 in the evening.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, it's 4 and 3. On Wednesday, it's 3 and 3.
Yeah.
On Thursday, it's still 3 and 3. And eventually it whittles down to, on the last day, it's 1 tablet. And the next day, you should have been weaned off alcohol and you don't need it anymore, but don't ever drink again. And she did it. And a few months later, she threw me a party for my GCSE results because I'd done quite well.
Yes, very well.
The night before, she started drinking again. So we'd got a load of alcohol into the house for the party. She'd bought me and my mates alcohol to drink at a house party. And I was very conscious of it. So I made her keep it all under my bed. I was like, it'd be best if it's under my bed, because then you can't get it if you feel tempted. And she was like, yeah, okay, if that's what you want, fair enough.
This is a very heavy conversation for a 16-year-old boy to be having with his mother. I'm going to suggest that at that point in your life, that's your normal. I think.
Yeah.
Has it taken you longer in life to kind of look back and see how unusual and extraordinary
It's taken therapy.
Yes.
Like, it's taken me saying this stuff to a therapist and her going, say that sentence again.
Exactly, yeah.
And imagine someone saying it to you about their life.
I mean, I could have said Jesus Christ a good few times during what you've just told me. And at the beginning of this chat, we talked about your eye.
Yeah.
And we talked about feeling different, and that thing of, you know, anyone feeling different ends up, you know, the stand up facing the other way.
Yeah.
What you've just described must have made you feel incredibly different to the rest of the world through your eyes.
Yeah. Do you know what? I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. I felt really different in this regard. I felt like I had the only parent who drank.
Yeah. Your dad's drinking is manageable?
At that stage.
At that stage, okay. Yeah.
But as I get older and meet more people and speak to them, I realise everyone's parents, like a lot of parents, are either big drinkers or drug users, or I don't feel that level of difference anymore. Well, I used to feel like I've got an alcoholic parent. That's my thing. And now it's like, oh, pretty much everyone has eventually.
Well, isn't it amazing that you felt like that? You've gone on to do a thing where you communicate, you face the other way in a room, you communicate these things with an audience, you create a show that speaks to a lot of people globally. We know that Have a Word audience is global. Mm-hmm. And it's in that you find connection.
Yeah.
To go on that journey, a remarkable journey from that boy in the estate to being one of the biggest comedians, you know, certainly in the UK. Mm. And it's on that journey that you then discover that actually lots of people have been through this. Do you find comfort in that?
Absolutely, yeah. Comfort, and also it's a bit bleak, isn't it? Because it's like, it wasn't a good reality for me to go through as a kid, and a lot of people have gone through it.
Could you have been the massive theatre filling comic that's, you know, the co-founder of Have a Word without that? The kind of credentials and the attributes that your upbringing has given you, is that the kind of dark, twisted irony of life is it those things that
It's
have made
very possible.
who I'm talking
It's
to
something
now?
I've considered before. I'm a big sort of believer in the butterfly effect, and that's essentially what this chat is, isn't it? Is the flap of the wings of my parents breaking up then could have led to these arenas, and
Absolutely.
and the gust that led to it. But I don't know. You know, there's also part of me that believes in sort of destiny in a way. Like, some people are just meant to do a certain thing, and I think I'm so obsessed with stand up that maybe I would have found a way eventually, regardless of what happened. But also, what is that destiny not only there because of the childhood? So it's such a convoluted, complicated equation.
Very, very
Yeah.
complicated. I'm going to say something very complicated. I'm going to say something almost kind of knowingly dramatic. But could you say stand-up saved you?
Yes, absolutely. Because I only started going to therapy like 2 years ago, maybe not even that. And before that, stand-up is how I deal with problems.
How you see the world.
And I think the eye thing is a perfect example of it, because before I joked about my eye on stage, if someone else made a comment about it, I would want to punch their head in. And now if someone makes it, I'm like, because I have taken control of it. And it's how I deal with every issue, is I'm taking control of it by making jokes about it. So I've spoke about my mum. A really sweet thing that happened before my mum passed away, because a really sad thing about my mum passing away when she did is that she'd never actually seen me do stand-up live. So she'd seen clips and stuff. But
so you had started.
Yeah.
She was alive, but she never got to
I was 21. Yeah. So I was 3 years in. But she'd been so ill for those years. But yeah, back to the house party thing. A few days before the house party, we bought all the alcohol and I put it under my bed. And I was every time I would come in from playing footy or whatever, I was checking under the bed to make sure nothing had been taken. And there was 2 bottles of vodka. And I noticed one was about 2 milliliters lower than the other one. Like, I only knew they were different because I'd looked at them so many times. And she'd poured herself a vodka and filled it back up with water, but not to the perfect level. So she'd missed it by a milliliter or 2 because of that. I was like, have you been drinking? And she was like, no. And I was like, and she was like, I've had 1 drink. And then she was like, look, have the house party and then we'll deal with this on Monday. And she did rehab again, but it just never worked. And eventually, like I said to you before, she was a mum first and then a drinker. And it got to a point where she was prioritising drinking over being a mum. And that's when we moved in with my dad. It was through, at the time, my dad had a flat above a chippy. And we were staying with him every single night because things had got so bad with my mum. And he was like, I'm going to have to take you off her.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get a house for us.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be us 3 because this is not okay.
No.
And, you know, that was a really good thing that he did. A lot of people would argue, you know, he's just doing his job as a dad, but, you know,
it's still a lot of responsibility.
It's an undertaking, and it's, you know, it was, you know,
and it's loving and caring. You know, you could talk about the duty of it.
Yeah, it's loving and caring. Me and my dad then developed a bit of a difficult relationship because my dad for years used to drink in the pub on a Thursday and a Friday night. My dad would go out.
Common where you're from. That's common. That's routine for dads to be doing.
And he was in a darts team, so they had a Thursday league and a Friday league, and he would play in that.
Right.
And but when we moved in with him, through a combination of it being a bit more expensive to have 2 kids than to have an ex-wife who's got 2 kids living with her, he initially started going to darts just once a week. And then eventually he was going not at all, and he would drink at home.
Okay.
And I used to be like, are you fucking joking? Like, you've rescued us from this. And he's like, I'm not drinking like your mum. I'm having a couple of whiskeys every other night.
Yes,
and I was like, but that's where she started.
Yes, and that's the way to justify it to yourself, isn't it? That there's something worse happening elsewhere and I'm doing better than that.
Yeah.
It sounds like you, when you talked about being when you kind of became pally with your mum, there's a sense that the dynamic, the traditional dynamic of, you know, mother, son, father, son is, you know, it's broken slightly. It sounds like, you know, when you're calling out your dad at such a young age, you've kind of had to take over from a very young age being the father figure.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I feel very parental to my little brother in that way. Because when we moved in with my dad and he, you know, started drinking, we both, me and my little brother, hated it. Because we were like, this is not right. You can't, like, my attitude was, you can't put us through this again.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And his attitude was, I'm not. But, like, you know, I don't want to throw my dad under the bus because he did do his best and he does to this day do his best. But I was right. He now is a person who drinks whiskey pretty much every day.
Right.
And, you know, we don't see each other every week. But I love him. And,
yes.
You know.
Yeah.
But I was right. I was right.
And it should be said, in what you've described with the drinking and letting that maybe get away slightly, or going too far in that direction, he's supported you with the stand-up.
Yeah. So very supportive and
happy. It's like it is a different question. Do you think that you give your dad happiness by doing stand-up?
Yeah, certainly. You know, certainly now that it's all worked out.
That it's a success. It had to be a success.
Yeah, so I got into university, as I say, after 3 years of A-level, so I'm 19. And I did go for a week.
You went to university for a week?
Yeah, so what had happened was...
Maths?
Maths with statistics.
Sure.
So it was a 4-year course and you end up with a master's. You sign up for the master's before you even go, sort of thing.
Wow.
And I'd been doing stand-up by the time I got into university for a year and 3 months, 15 months. And I loved it and it was going well and I was starting to get the odd paid gig here and there. And I was also working in bars and nightclubs at the time as well. So I'm looking at my life going, right, I'm going to be doing gigs and then going to a nightclub and then trying to get up for university the next day. Something's got to give. Something. Because otherwise I'm going to be awake 24 hours a day. And I didn't think I was going to get into the university that I wanted to get into because I had an A
Which
in maths,
was
the University of Liverpool.
Right.
I had an unconditional offer from John Moore's in Liverpool to do a maths-based course, but it's not a red brick university. So not to, you know, disrespect polytechnics and metropolitan universities, but for me, it felt like if I'm not going to a top university, I'm just not going to go. So I knew I had the A in maths.
That, by the way, that really falls in line with the, you know, even the stand-up comedian Adam Rowe, which is big. It's always
It's the best or not at all.
Yeah.
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 So I'd applied to both and I got an unconditional offer from John Moore's, which is rare, but I got it. And then to get into the University of Liverpool at the time, you needed to do the course I was doing. You needed AAB. That was the minimum requirements. 2 A's and a B at A level, with one of the A's being in maths. I got an A in maths, I got a C in psychology, and I got an E, which is not good, in further maths. So and further maths is second year and third year uni level maths work. It's an A level to do that. It's very difficult stuff. And you really have to be putting the work in if you're going to do it. And I didn't. So I thought I'd probably get a B in psychology. So I was like, I've got the A, I've got the B, but the other thing that's meant to be another A is going to be the A. In the end, I got a C in psychology.
Yeah.
So I'm nowhere near the requirements to get into the University of Liverpool. But I wake up on results day and I've been accepted to the University of Liverpool. And I asked the guy who's the head of the department why I got in, and he said it was your personal statement. My personal statement was essentially, and it wasn't much longer than what I'm about to say. It was, hey, look at my GCSE results. I got them without revising. That's the attitude I've took into A-level. I've learnt my lesson, but I've still got an A in maths. So imagine how good I must be at maths if I'm not even trying. I was like, I'm doing stand-up. I love it. That's been a big focus for me. And even when I'm not focused on it, I'm getting an A in maths. So I think you should let me come and study maths at the University of Liverpool. Right? And he was like...
The arrogance.
Yeah, but it worked.
Yeah.
And he let me in. And then after a week, I fucking left.
Thanks for that. Yeah, cheers.
Just wanted to know I could, you know. What had happened was, because I didn't think I was going to get in, I didn't apply for student finance at all.
Right.
So I'm a week in, and he's like, oh, don't worry, just apply for it now. You'll get it. Like, this happens sometimes, and it'll all be fine. And I thought, after a week, I had a conversation with myself, and I was like, right, let's say I get this degree, and I get a first-class degree in maths and a master's. What am I going to do? What's next? Because one option is a PhD, which I don't want. I don't want to be in education for another 10 years. The other option is to become a maths teacher or a lecturer or something like that. And the main thing to do with maths and statistics is to go and become an actuary, which is sort of like an accountant for insurance firms. Right. It's figuring out how much people should pay and be paid out and this sort of stuff. It's good money.
And I was going to say, it's still remarkable for someone that comes from the estate you grew up in.
You would get 40 grand a year starting at 21 to do that job. So that was, you know, seen as a lucrative and good thing.
Yes.
And I was just like, would I be remotely happy doing that? And I knew how happy stand-up was making me. And I was like, it can't possibly give me what this does. It just can't.
Yeah.
And I decided to drop out. And I spoke to my dad. And I was the first kid in our family and everything to go to university and stuff. So he's dead proud and, you know. And I was like, look, I'm going to drop out. I'm not going to do it. And he was like, why? And I said, stand up. I was like, I love it. It's what I want to do. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a promise. If in 10 years I haven't got anywhere with it, just give me a decade. I was like, I'll be 29 and you can fix your life at 29. You don't have to have it all figured out before you're 30. So I'll just go back. And he went,
okay. Still a remarkable, that in itself, to have that foresight that looks so far ahead, and again that confidence, Adam, to ask someone to give you 10 years. It's really extraordinary.
Well, thank you. And yeah, he said, well, go for it and go all in. And then for the next few years, you know, I was working in bars, and sometimes like he'd charge me 50 quid a week keep, you know, to like you pay your parents like
yes.
a bit of whatever. And some weeks I'd just be like, I'll have to give you 100 next week when I've got a better paying gig. And he was like, fine with it.
Well, it's amazing. And then you were given, it seems like there was a freedom there to go on. You had this, or you developed this kind of vision. You had this imagination of what you could go on to do, and this belief.
You asked before whether I ever sort of envisioned being this like really famous comic.
Yeah.
And I said, no, not at that time.
Yes.
But once I started and I was like a year in,
yeah,
I was like, I can do something with this. Once I realized I could get paid for it. And the goal I set myself was to film a special at the Liverpool Empire before I was 30. And I filmed it last year when I was 32 at the Liverpool Empire. So I was 2 years late. But I take the 2 COVID years off and call it a win.
Well, that's the perfect ending.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. And before you go, I would just say, because you talked about earlier the box ticking in television, and giving those voices so that people can identify with it. The reason I genuinely from my heart wanted to do this was so that people could watch this from backgrounds similar to yours, hear that story and think, oh, I can do this. So to anyone listening that's at home and perhaps one of their parents is drinking too much, things have gone awry, they're on benefits, they're in an area where not much is expected of you, what would you say to them that might give them the hope to go on and achieve that? And I know it's a big question.
It's a really big question, and it's going to have to be a slightly complicated answer, because my answer, with a caveat to follow, is you are just going to have to work harder than everyone else. And the sad thing is, when you work harder than everyone else, it doesn't necessarily mean it's definitely going to work.
Yeah.
So find something you're good at and that you like, and work harder than everybody else who's doing it. Because then, even if you don't end up massively successful, you'll spend all of your time doing something you're good at that you like. And the alternative is doing something you don't like that you're not good at, or something you don't like that you are good at that you just are just doing for the money. I think you'll end up miserable. I think that's why a lot of people are miserable. And I think, there's a huge sort of class divide at the minute, and it's getting worse,
Yeah.
And billionaires have made more money since the pandemic than they did in the 40 years before, and poor people have lost more money since then than the 40 years before. The gap's getting bigger, and it's not good. And listening to all these people on the internet who tell you all you've got to do is become an entrepreneur and then you'll be a millionaire in 6 months. No. But you can have a life and a career and a job and a passion that you care about and you're good at. But if you're from a poorer background, you are just going to have to work harder. But on the flip side of all of that, there's also going to be people, because we do have some victim complexes in our society now. And there is going to be people who go, oh, it's impossible for someone from a working class background to make it because they don't have the opportunities that the middle and upper classes have. That is bollocks. And I am proof of that. And I'm not saying it's for everyone's going to have the opportunity. And I have got lucky, and I did have supportive parents, and I did find something really young that I loved and, was, in my opinion, good at.
And mine.
But you don't let people tell you, oh, you're from there, so you can't do it, and you should just get a safe job, and because you can. But you will have to work harder. People are on a ladder and you're on the floor and you're both trying to change the same light bulb. You're going to have to build a ladder. They've already got one. So go and find ladder equipment and make your own, because it's the only way you're going to be able to get high enough, and other people have already been given one. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to be more resourceful and determined. And you mentioned earlier having self-belief. It's not even self-belief, it's necessity. It's not like I believe I can do this. It's I've got to.
Yeah.
I've got to, or it won't work.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you, mate. Fuck me. What an end that was. I was nearly in tears. That was amazing. I can't believe I've got a gig after that.
So have I.
If you enjoyed that, please remember, do me a favour, like and subscribe. Really helps out the podcast and gets it going out to more people, and the more the merrier. I've been Seann Walsh. This is Glass Clown. Thank you very much.